Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, GM White. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we could get you on. I have seen your covers quite a few places, shared from my friends and things. And first time I saw, book one's cover, I was like, oh, and even like the old one, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then when I saw that you were switching stuff around, I was like, oh, that's even cooler. And I liked your blurb and everything for book one. So it's really nice to see, like book two and then, your zero point 0.5, with the
Yeah, yeah.
purple cover. That one's really cool too. So I'm so glad that we could talk and get you on today. I'm a huge swordsman fan myself, so
Thank
I'm
you for
really
having me
interested
on.
to see what you have to say. So we'll start right there with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Um, Sporadic, I think, is the answer because it's one of those things. I've always loved stories, always been interested in stories. As a kid, avid reader, typical, writer. I was a kid walking around the house with my, holding a book with my finger as the bookmark, waiting for a lull in conversation to start reading again. Or family's watching a TV show I don't care about. Start reading again. Um, and I did all sorts of other types of storytelling, like I was into acting and I've been in bands, like involved with songwriting, so on and off all through my life. But I kind of never got into writing fiction. I sort of dabbled in plays and sketches and stuff, but I never kind of wrote fiction. And then one day I was on my commute, my old job when I used to live in London, and I just had an idea for like the first sentence of something. The only thing I had to write on was my phone, and I grabbed it and I just started writing and haven't stopped. And then each of the books that I've written and published, each one has come along at like a point of quite big change in my life. So it's kind of like
Oh yeah.
as I was sort of finishing up the first draft of the Swordsman's Lament, we found out we were going to have our firstborn son, our little boy,
Mm.
and he was due October 2019. So I set myself a deadline, September 2019, to get the book finished, which was lucky. I published it earlier than I expected because he was then born exactly a month early. So
Oh wow.
that was a confusing time.
Yeah.
And then I wrote the novella, Swordsman's Intent, and that was like my first. I took a break after he was born, and then kind of was adjusting to having a little one in the house and kind of trying to find little bits of writing time here and there. And then the Swordsman's Descent, the sort of second novel, I started writing after I'd become a stay-at-home dad. And so that was again a totally different kind of like
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
nap times and taking him to nursery and all this sort of stuff, and just kind of trying to eke out bits of time here and there. So they've all been quite different experiences, but yeah, managed to get them out there anyway.
Yeah.
That's the
Like,
thing.
I give you credit for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely changes, the schedules
Mm.
of things. Yeah. That's
Oh
like
yeah.
the other day. They're like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm barely getting anything done." I'm like, "I'm enjoying myself." But I think productivity is definitely not there. Don't have the schedule done
uh,
like that. But
I'm aware of how much time I wasted before. I could have got so much done before, But yeah,
that's literally
I'm
how it feels, right? But I feel like
yeah.
you're like, yeah, like you never really realize that. You're like, "Oh, I shouldn't have watched that show. I should have been over
Should have
doing."
working on something
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah. That's why now my
yeah.
friend, he's like, "You seem like you're always doing something." I was like, "Yeah, because now I know how much time I was wasting." That's definitely the case. That's hilarious. This is always my favorite question to ask
Yeah.
people, so we'll go with that second one because I always love talking to people about their work. So, what are your Royal Champion books about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So I mean, on the face of it, I'd say they're swashbuckling adventure stories, but with hearts. And for me, that's kind of an important aspect to it. I always describe like fantasy and science fiction as being a way of viewing life through a different lens. So
That's
like
a
for me,
good one.
it's a safe sandbox to kind of play around in and kind of explore quite big themes and ideas and things like that. And with these books, they follow a character called Belasco, he's an aging swordsman, the royal champion. He's the reckoned to be one of the best swordsmen in the world, but he's when we meet him in the Swordsman's Lament, he's kind of at the peak or just over the peak of his powers, and a lifetime of kind of fighting and putting his body through it is kind of coming back to haunt him. He's got a lot of injuries and aches and pains and things like that, and that's partly inspired. That's partly inspired by the fact I have I've got joint damage in
Hmm.
one of my feet, and I was thinking one day, I was like, what if instead of being a slightly overweight guy that worked at a farm, I was, if my life relied on my physicality, and I
Yeah.
didn't have access to kind of modern medicine that kind of could
Yeah.
take the pain away and things like that. Well, how would that impact you? And I've been writing a book that was sort of a more of a coming of age, fantasy story,
Mm.
and just I just found myself wanting to write an older protagonist,
Yeah. Yeah.
wanting to write someone who'd been through the mill a bit more. Um, and I kind of all of this kind of came together in my head. I started to picture the character, I started to have an idea for it, and then one night we were house sitting for some friends, and I woke up about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I basically dreamed the first scene of the book. As I was lying there half awake, it just came to
Oh,
me,
that's
and I imagined
awesome.
the whole thing. And then again, I grabbed the nearest thing to me, a bedside table, grabbed my phone, and like tapped out the first scene of the book. And
Oh, that's
it's
awesome.
as it's published, it's almost exactly as I wrote it that night.
Oh,
Obviously, kind
wow.
of edited and stuff, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was. And then I kind of put that in the drawer and was like, I'm going to come back to that. And then I was looking at something to do for NaNoWriMo, and kind of was like, I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to expand on it,
Oh, that's cool.
and that's how that came about. But yeah, it was yeah, it's an interesting one because quite a low magic setting as well,
Mm. Oh, that's
which
nice. Yeah.
it wasn't intentional. As I was writing the book, I was like, oh yeah, that's just what this is. There is some magic in the world, but it's kind of, my idea is it's at the edges, and in the cities and the built up areas where people live, it's not really a thing anymore, but there are people still in contact with it, and so you kind of get hints at it, but it's not like a big feature of the book kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool. I always wonder about that. I was asking my friend, we've been debating this recently, like, if
Mm,
you had science and magic, like, because I think it's more like Malazan Book of the Fallen, right? Like they have certain scientific things,
yeah,
the whatever Maranth ammunitions, like the bombs, grenades and stuff, but and like some
yeah,
other things, but like really like they don't have that much unless you're talking about like kitchen shamel or something. But like we're talking about like humans, and we're like, I asked the question, I was like, if you have and like if you have a high magic setting, I'm like, would they not
yeah,
rely on that more, and you probably wouldn't have as much. I'm a history teacher, so I always like to
yeah,
think
yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Like they probably don't have a lot of X, Y, and Z, or like Aloe Law, or whatever with Brandon
yeah,
Sanderson. It's
yeah,
like, would it just blend together into the society and not be too
yeah,
much of a thing, or so yeah, that I always like different grades of magic, because to me it always makes me think something different, and
yeah,
it's like different flavor of ice cream, I guess, like
yeah.
same dessert but different flavor, so that's really
Yeah.
cool.
And as you say, it kind of once you start doing the world building and you think, oh, if there is a lot of magic and it's sort of fairly freely available, it is going to completely change
Yeah.
the world and the way it develops and all that sort of
Yeah, yeah.
thing. And
Like I
then at
had
what,
to Yeah, well, like I have my fantasy site I'm working for a long time. I don't want, no offense to anybody, I don't want Kindle Vella to have
yeah,
my rights to it for a year and a half. But so I have
yeah,
my other world, which is like the same universe. But like that one's like I would say there's less magic than my original.
yeah,
Like there's still magic. It's like a D&D setting, but it's not
yeah,
as readily available. So it was cool to, yeah, like you said, like to think about that in terms of society, and I'm like, oh, it's
yeah.
kind of cool to, world build differently, that way I'm not always getting burnt out. Yeah, it's really cool. Well, that sounds awesome. I like that you chose an older character too, with some aches and pains. I always found that really fascinating with The Dark Knight Rises, where like
Mm,
Batman's got to fight Bane when he's like the most decrepit that he's ever been, and then
yeah,
then when he gets broken, it's even worse because he's older and and
yeah,
more of a veteran, and that always stuck as a writer into my mind. I'm like, oh, how would that affect somebody,
yeah,
in terms of, yeah, being, in terms of being in that type of situation. So I feel like a swordsman in particular, like I do martial arts,
yeah.
so I know for a fact that, you definitely get slowed down, and, there's different things that don't quite work as well. So for me, think of that as a fantasy setting. I don't know, it seems like a cool writing exercise to,
Yeah. And that
try and
thing of,
find.
when you've been known to be the best, or that you
Yeah,
have been the best, and you do start to slow down and, all these different things, there's always somebody's gonna come along that's faster.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And obviously the levels of skill and training and things come into play. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's that kind of, he knows eventually somebody better might come along,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the kind of, I mean, the swordsman's lament of the title that he kind of jokes about is the older I get, the better I was. sort of
Mm.
thing. It's kind of like a hindsight thing of like, oh yeah, that was just pretty good.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, yeah, I just like that idea more of kind of someone who's had the rough edges knocked off them a bit. They kind
yeah,
of not ground down, but they're kind of just they're a bit more worn, perhaps.
yeah. Well, there's also so much more you can do too, like past like my friend did something like that and then had like his swordsman like had like a past vendetta, like he killed this guy's dad, didn't know he had a son, the son came
Yeah,
after him, there's this whole plot, and like it just there was just more that he could do, because
yeah,
of he had adventured for a longer time,
yeah,
and had different things go on, and that's why I have like my Kindle Vella series, I have these two characters, and one's like my, like my age, like 30, mid 30s, the other
yeah,
one's really young, and they pair up and then they create new enemies, but the one has like old enemies they're gonna have to deal with, and
yeah, yeah,
all sorts of things. And yeah, so I think having characters at different ages, I like that people are doing that now. I think the
yeah,
last 10 years, it's really been a bigger thing. Before
yeah,
the
yeah,
last 10 years, I
definitely.
can't really, I think indie in particular, no offense to anybody, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but indie in
Yeah,
particular is where I've seen more of it personally, the last
yeah,
10
I'd
years.
say so.
Everybody
It's
else is like, oh,
interesting.
we're going to be 21 or just starting off level one, and it's kind of cool from a D&D aspect too, or a
Mm,
gaming aspect where if you, like I always wonder like how their lives be different, at towards the
yeah,
end of adventuring. I have one
yeah,
story I want to write where the adventuring party where all of them except for their youngest they're like,
yeah,
they're like 50s, to
yeah,
60s. And, yeah, like I want to see what happens at the end of their adventuring party or
yeah,
whatever. So yeah, I think those kind of things are cool to write about. That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, that
It's
actually makes me more
yeah,
excited because I didn't know that about your main character. So my
yeah,
writing brain, that already excites me a lot more. I was already excited to read
yeah.
your books, but that actually adds a nice little flavor. So that's really cool.
It's funny you sort of mentioned the kind of sons coming out of the woodwork to seek vengeance and things like that. Because one of the things at the start of the second novel is there's basically this event that happens sort of it's before it's sort of about during the war that's like 15, 20 years before the first book,
Mm.
where Belasco makes his name, and basically he holds a pass against an
Oh, that's cool.
enemy army, because it kind of narrows down to a switchback and it's only like single file, and he basically holds
Yeah.
this pass on his own all day, kills tons of people. And then a generation later, when he's kind of this high profile character, people keep turning up to the dates going, you killed my father. It's kind of like it's the third challenger since the spring. Oh, okay, here we go, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
really
just
cool.
these people constantly coming out of the woodwork, and there's this
Yeah,
whole nation of people that basically hate him because he kind of ruined their war effort.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
That's
it's kind
awesome.
of a lot of weight to carry, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's like a very unique like character aspect. I feel like so that's like really interesting. This is
Yeah,
also like the reason why I do these interviews because I feel like stuff like that it really makes me think. Like breaking down. I feel like you write. There's so many broad things you can write, and then there's
yeah,
those tiny details that for me I think really make or break characters and
yeah,
particularly make them. And if you don't have them, I'm like, okay, this is like a I was just talking to somebody about that. Like we're talking about like Star Wars with Ray, and I'm like, well,
yeah.
things that worked for me that didn't work for them, or vice versa. And I'm like, well, I wish that they had added a couple of these things earlier because some people stopped watching.
Mm,
It's too much
yeah, yeah, yeah,
or that that's what they thought or whatever. And there were some things that I thought hit differently for me where I was like, oh, that was really interesting or really cool.
yeah,
And yeah, so I think that like I think it really taught me that you have to be really careful of your audience. And there were things I thought they were going to do with Finn that I really liked that
yeah, yeah,
they didn't do later, and I felt he got shafted personally, and that's one of the like
yeah.
characters where I'm like, why? Like you had him, he was so cool. Like now
He
he's
was
a
clearly set up to be a stormtrooper turned
yeah,
Jedi. That was
yeah,
clearly what was set up. Like,
yeah.
it
I'm
didn't go
just
there at
like,
all. Like, come
yep,
on.
yep. I just goes to show you that Hollywood, it's
They
a good
missed a big
time.
opportunity there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they could have had one of the coolest Jedi of all time. But with Ray, like I think the two of them taking people on would have made a much better
Yeah,
story. And they could have done different aspects, of the Force or or
yeah,
something. Or they could have been trained. I think my friend he said this yesterday, and now I can't get it out of my mind. He's like, "Oh, Luke could have trained both of them, or
yeah.
whatever, and they could have been different." I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then they could have done the whole thing that they did later. I know I don't want to spoil anything if
Yeah,
you haven't seen it, but yeah, I don't know. We're like
yeah.
as writers, we're just like missed opportunities. So
Yeah,
but
you
that's
can't
really
switch the
cool.
writer brain off, the writer
Yeah,
brain is always ticking away.
it's really hard to. It's really hard to. And this is another one that I really like to ask people. So, what or who were some of your influences when it came to writing your Royal Champion
Yeah,
books? I know there's certain, like the Count of Monte Cristo. Count of Monte
Yeah,
Cristo for me was always a really cool book. And then
yeah.
when the movie came out in like mid 2000s, it was awesome, and they had great great actors in it. Henry Cavill played the Count's Monte Cristo's son. I think it was like
Yeah, that's it.
Cav- Caviezel. I forget his first name. Yeah, he was just like made amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but just like things like that, I was always like, oh, I loved fencing after that. So I got
yeah.
really into it for a while. So I was just curious that, like
Yeah.
what were some of your influences in terms of these books?
Um, I guess like quite an obvious sort of influence in terms of books is Sebastian de Castell's Greatcoat series. In
Oh,
terms of like swashbuckling fun,
yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of thing. Like it has they're different, but they have a similar vibe. Um, and funnily enough, I did fence for a
Oh,
while when I was a kid.
oh, that's awesome.
My mum used to fence, and I kind of was always curious about it, and so I fenced for a bit. Like not not long enough to become seriously good, but enough to kind of understand the sort of the movements and things like that. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
I think it helps when you're coming to write the
Oh,
sword
for sure.
fighting.
Yeah, yeah.
Annoyingly, I didn't know Hemmer was a thing
Oh, yeah.
until I lived in London for 13 years. No idea it existed. I moved to a small island in the middle of nowhere with no access to any of these things, and suddenly I find out about it. I'm like, I'm so pissed off. I would have been down there all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, and RJ Barker, I love. He's an author I absolutely love. I love his Bone Ships
yeah.
books.
Yeah, yeah.
But his Wounded Kingdom series features a disabled protagonist,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I remember listening to an interview with him. I can't remember what podcast it was on, and he was talking about because he has, I think it's Crohn's disease or something. He had some very severe, which he nearly died
Yeah,
from,
yeah.
and he was talking about kind of using that experience and writing his own disability in a way into the book with a character who's got a totally different um, thing, but kind of writing his own truth a bit more. And that's when I kind of started to think about applying kind of my own like joint damage and stuff like that, and kind of
Yeah.
applying that and thinking about writing a character that's a bit true to me in terms of age and experience and things like that. Again, if he was, an amazing swordsman and not a overweight bloke that works on a farm. So, and then I guess I don't know. Then it's like I think we're all the sum of all of our influences, aren't we? So I mean, you mentioned the Count
Yeah.
of Monte Cristo, and that
Yeah,
reminded
yeah.
me that I loved like the Three Musketeers and
Oh,
D'Artagnan
love,
and that stuff
yeah,
as a
yeah.
kid, and then in terms of like authors that I love, I sort of got into fantasy in the sort of early 90s when I was a sort of teenager, sort of young teenager. In fact, no, I was like 10 or 11 or so, so before teenager. And it was people like, Tad Williams, Robin Hobb,
Oh, yeah.
David Gemmell, David Eddings, Tamara Pierce, Terry Pratchett, who I love. This might not be immediately obvious in my work, but I think there's a bit of humor in there. Raymond D. Feist, there's so many people that you kind of read and you absorb, and it all feeds in. There's like an underworld aspect of my books with characters, and that kind of part of that was influenced by like Jimmy the Hand from the Rift War books and stuff like that. There's kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
little elements that just feed in that you don't kind of even realize are there until you're kind of writing it, and you kind of go, oh, this character's like, oh, and you kind of go off on your storm of inspiration, and
Yeah, yeah.
then you kind of surface and go, oh yeah, I can see the influence. Or
Yeah,
I can see it. Other people may not always
yeah,
notice it.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff in there.
Well, I think influence too is hard, because I think that a lot of people think that influence is just like, oh, you wrote the same character. And for me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
they're like Forgotten Realms influenced me a lot. So like I'm a teacher too. So like you're not gonna see me like my urban fantasy series, it's a little like I have characters that like swear and stuff. Like a couple of them are like ex-Marines and stuff, and a lot of Marines I know like swore.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's just what it is, And there's I was trying to write, particular people, particular ways, and
Yeah,
and just there's different things, but like you're not gonna find like a bunch of sex scenes in my books because I just that's not what I enjoy reading. If they're
yeah,
there,
yeah,
like
yeah,
whatever, but like that's not like it's not what I'm about. So like it's
yeah,
not what I'm interested in writing. You'll find a lot of battles. I might throw a little bit of romance, and let your imagination or whatever. But like for me, like
yeah,
in Realms, I was like I said to my mom, I was like they were so good, like they might have been violent or whatever, but they weren't like crass or and I think the
yeah,
toned
yeah,
down, like they were trying a lot of the books they were trying to get away or whatever rather than,
yeah,
genocide or something. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes they're a little bit up there, but I think that yeah, like but like now I can tell, when I'm writing something or how I write a character, that I might go totally different than something I read, and that could be the
Yeah, yeah,
influence. Like, I enjoyed the story and the characters, but I would have done it this way, like we were talking about with Star Wars, and I
yeah,
think that influence is different. I think a lot of people think, oh, you're just going to copy something or be a
yeah,
clone of this person, and
yeah.
I think maybe it's just one, like you're saying, like maybe one aspect or character or something like that. So,
Yeah, just a turn of phrase or kind
yep,
of a rhythm to how you write, or
definitely.
everyone's got their own voice, and that's the thing. People
Yep.
kind of go, particularly with I don't know, story theory, like the hero's journey. If I go, oh, how
Yeah,
many
yeah, yeah,
ways can you tell the same structure or same
yeah,
story?
yeah,
You'll go, well,
totally.
everybody's voice is different. Only you can write the story that you want to write.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nobody's going to write the same story the same way. So
It's so funny that you
yeah,
mentioned that. Like I'm actually going to do this exercise with a couple of authors this summer.
yeah,
We're going to together on one podcast come up with an outline for a short story
cool.
and come up with the characters and then come up with their backgrounds.
Yeah,
So we have all the same pieces and then, like a little
yeah,
bit of the world, but then all go separately. And then like a week later, we're gonna
yeah,
come and then yeah, we're gonna like talk about how like same menu, right? Because everybody's always like, oh,
yeah,
they're gonna steal this, they're gonna steal that. And I'm like, even if somebody takes your idea, I'm like, they're gonna write it unless they like have your notes verbatim. And even then,
yeah,
they're gonna write them a different way. So I
yeah,
just think it'd be a really cool exercise just to show that, everybody should, if they want to,
yeah,
should
yeah,
write, and you might come up with a character that even with the same menu, of choices,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you can come up with a completely different idea. And
And still
I
have
think
something
really,
completely different. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
a really
yeah.
interesting idea, actually. It's a really cool exercise.
I know, right? Yeah. So I heard somebody talk about it on a podcast, and I tried for years to
Yeah.
find them, and I think they did two podcasts. They were going to do it, and then they were done. So yeah, I that's like on my list this summer. So it's gonna be interesting. But and then we're
Yeah.
actually gonna post them for people. We're gonna do like an event. So we're
Ah,
gonna post them so that people
yeah.
can actually read them. And then
Cool.
we'll take hopefully a couple of people will come on who have read them and talk about differences and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're really gonna analyze them. So it's gonna be like a little
Awesome.
mini series. Yeah. So I think it'll be cool.
That'd be really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be
I
cool.
like that idea.
So I'm really interested in your novella.
Yeah.
So what is your novella, The Swordsman's Intent, about, and how does it fit with the rest of the
Yeah.
books?
So it's a prequel novella. It's set 15 years before the events in The Swordsman's Lament, and it tells the story of how Belasco becomes the royal champion.
Oh, that's cool.
Uh, he's the first commoner to hold the title as well.
Oh, that's
So he's kind of working against a system and people that kind of feel they should have it by right because of their social position and things like that. People aren't very keen on this kind of commoner, this soldier coming in
yeah,
and
yeah.
sort of upstaging everyone. And it sets up some of the events, introduces some of the characters from the Swordsman's Lament,
Mm.
but it also there's characters in the Swordsman's Intent which reoccur in the Swordsman's
Oh,
Descent, which is
cool.
the second book. So because I wrote the first novel, Swordsman's Lament, and then I wrote Swordsman's Intent, and then I was like, oh, actually, I'm going to bring some of these characters back in the next book, just because I enjoyed them so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I kind of designed it. I planned it out so you could either read it before you read the first book, or you can read it afterwards, and either it will
Mm.
set things up for you before you then go and read the book, or it fills in the backstory for you. So
Oh,
kind of
that's smart.
it works whichever way around.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
feel like that's very smart. I tried doing that. Like I was Mark Tim and I talked a lot about like his prequel novella for The Blood of the Spear, like Starbinder, and then he's writing book
yeah,
two. And him and I talked a lot about that because I was like, I'm trying to figure out my urban fantasy character, and I'm like, it's so hard. But I'm like, I had these pre ideas, and I had a couple novellas, short stories I was going to do. Then I was like, oh, I want to do prequel novellas, and I'm like, it's probably not. I'm like, it's probably stupid, but I'm gonna like do three of them, and I'm gonna do like the bigger story in three parts, and
yeah,
then eventually I'll put them in an anthology. But I'm like, ooh, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna try it. You never
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And I just thought like people will probably pay $1, for the novella,
yeah,
on Kindle. And like three, you get $3 and there's your
yeah.
anthology. But I just thought like it was interesting because I just wanted to see because him and
Mm,
you both did the same thing, like wrote book one and then, two, and then, kind of went back to do that.
yeah,
So for me, it's like going to be like kind of an interesting writing exercise.
yeah,
And it's actually helped me flush out the story a little bit. But I like that you mentioned that because people ask me like, well, where does it fit and how does it fit? And I'm trying to do the same
yeah,
thing. Like you don't
yeah,
have to read any of them before book one, but it also, if you did, it would give you extra,
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So yeah,
No,
filling
I
out.
like it, and it works well because you can then run like special offers to the novella.
Yep.
If you price, I mean, mine's priced at the ebook's like 99 cents, 99 pence. But I also offer it as a reader magnet. So if you'll sign up to my newsletter, they can get it for free. So it kind of works that way as well, because you can
Yeah,
flag that up on kind of the listings on the on Amazon and Kobo and those places. And so you do get a steady stream of people signing up to your newsletter, so they can kind of get the reader magnet, which is, and I sort of bundle it with other short stories and stuff that you can only get by getting the reader magnet. And I've got a couple of those I want to write again, like kind of fleshing out characters from the book, and then I have like funny ideas that are just stuff I want to write for myself for fun, and they kind of end up just going, oh, I'll just give those to my newsletter subscribers.
smart.
I want to do one. I've been meaning to write for ages, which is kind of like a comedy, but it's about like a typical adventuring party, and they go to. The idea is they kind of go to kind of take out this necromancer, and they turn up, and this guy's like, look, I didn't mean to become a necromancer. I just, my pet goat over here, Blinky, he died, and I was desperate to bring him back, and I did. And then people turn up and they go, oh, can you resurrect my cousin? Can you resurrect my husband, my wife? I said, and then suddenly I've got an army of the undead, and it's like kind of like he's just kind of goes, no, I didn't mean to, It's just, anyway. I want to write that at some point.
and there's the Terry Pratchett right there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, now I really want to read that. So
I'll set up
that one. That's awesome. Well, that kind of leads us right into number 5. How many books do you plan to write in this world you've created?
I've got at least one more, but I've always sort of seen it as sort of an ongoing series. So rather than it being like a trilogy or a quartet or something like that, that it will be a character and worlds that I return to. Sort of, I have an idea, I go back to it, I write another book, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whilst going off and doing other stuff as well. So yeah, I've got at least definitely one more, which would be set a few years after the most recent novel. And I've got a vague idea for it. I haven't kind of fleshed it out yet. I'm sort of working on something else at the moment, and then I'll come back to that. I think I'm trying to plot and draft stuff in tandem to kind of give me a bit of time away. So I'm doing an outline for something else at the moment, then I'll do an outline for that book.
Yeah.
Edit that outline, edit that one, draft that, kind of just get myself a bit more space, breathing room before I come back to stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have to do that. That's why I was like, pick up the Kindle Bell, because I'm like, oh, I can do this. And then I got really into it, and I was like, oh, I have like 6 different characters or like stories I can write in the same world when I get bored. So I was like, oh, and I had the 2 I really liked. So I was like, I'll do this for a little bit. And like, I got hit with our furnace. So it was like really expensive. So I was like, oh, there's all my editing and art money for the
just gone.
Yeah, like 2023, 2024 gone. So I was like, well, now I have to do these short stories to make something. And my friend and I were just talking about doing some different things. I was like, oh, I want to put some stuff out there, and I was like, now I need a little bit of cushion in between and time to save again. Because self-publishing is very expensive. And so are babies. But it's interesting. I just like that how you said that, because like I loved Kelly McCullough's The Fallen Blade series. I love that there's like 7. Now when I interviewed him a while back, he was like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing like 3 more or whatever. And I love that I could just pick them up, and they were somewhat continuous, but at the same time, and I feel like the Jim Butcher series is a lot like that, at least 1 through 7, or 1 through 8 or whatever. But yeah, it's always cool when you can just like Paul S. Kemp has his Hammer and the Blade series, and I love those. They're just very episodic, and I think it comes from, again, influence like Robert E. Howard, Conan. I love just being able to pick one up, fully immersed, and then move on, and then be able to pick up another one. And maybe some characters are from different books and stuff, so there's nods or something, but not necessarily. You have to read them. Not that I don't love trilogies and stuff, but again, different flavors, stuff like that. But
it was, I think it was because originally I sort of wrote the first book as a bit of an experiment, because it's slightly shorter than it's about 60,000 words, so it's fairly short for a fantasy novel. And I kind of wrote it as I write it as a one-off, but there's opportunity to do more books because I want to see if there's a bit of an appetite for it.
Yeah, that's smart.
And people really like the book. I've got really good feedback. But they were like, oh, wouldn't mind if they were a bit longer. And I was like, okay, so I'll do that then. So the next book actually ended up being almost twice as long. It's like 114,000 words. But the first book as well was very self-contained. I kind of wanted to write a story that was set in one location, so it all take place in one city over a matter of days.
Yeah.
And that's partly because the first sort of fantasy book I tried to write involved a lot of questing and going backwards and forwards, and hang on, so I've got to figure out how far can people travel on horseback, how far can they travel on foot, right, how big are these kingdoms. I was just like, I gave myself so much work to do, and I was just like, I got so fed up with that after the fifth draft. I was like, right, now I'm going to do something that's a bit more straightforward for that. And then in the second book, second novel, they do go kind of off to a different country, and there's a bit more travel and things like that. So it just takes more time, kind of. It's great because you can do more world building, you can kind of flesh stuff out a bit more. So the first one was a bit of a trial, and then it kind of left it open that I could come back and do more. And I think it's something, that kind of episodic thing, you don't get as much in fantasy these days. Obviously you get it a lot more in kind of thrillers and crime fiction and stuff like that, where you can kind of literally just dip in and pick up a book.
Even like sci-fi,
and you don't have to necessarily read the previous books. You just find the one you like in your local bookshop. And so that's my idea, is it'd be a bit more episodic, but each one sort of builds on what's gone before without it being like a contained trilogy or something like that. That's it.
I think that's really smart. I like that. All right, this is one of my favorite questions for you, because I absolutely love the covers for your books. So who does your covers, and how did you decide on the designs and the colors for them?
For the covers I've got now, I use a company called Get Covers.
Nice. I was curious about them.
Yeah, they're based in Ukraine, so it's quite nice sending a little bit of money that way at the minute. But they're the sister company of a company called I don't know how you pronounce it, Mibelart or Miblart.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, they're kind of a sister company, and I think it's where they sort of their junior designers get experience and stuff like that. So I can't even remember, like, it's ridiculously low priced. I think just for a single ebook cover it's like $10, something like that. You can pay for more and things like that. So I'd already had this is the fourth cover design for the Swordsman's Lament. I played around with it a bit, because I made a few missteps. I'm not gonna lie. I got a few things wrong with the cover design to start with, which is a very valuable learning experience. I just kind of, I saw them and I saw some stuff they'd done. I thought, this looks really good, I'm going to give it a try. I already had the ebook, paperback, hardback, Ingram Spark, as well as Amazon and audiobook. So I needed like quite a lot of work done, and it was still only about $70 for everything, I think, all the different formats. And what I did was I sort of went to them, and I had an idea. I wanted the sort of the main character on the cover, but in sort of a representative way, sort of stylized, not in a kind of photoshopped character kind of way. So maybe using a silhouette, something like that. And I sort of gave them information about the world, that it was sort of, second world fantasy, but Renaissance sort of level of technology and architecture, that kind of thing. And gave them a few ideas, and I linked them through to a few covers that I liked that were similar. So like the UK editions of some of Brandon Sanderson's books don't have like the illustrated covers. They have kind of more stylized covers. And again, the Great Coats books, those things like that, I linked them to a few of those things and said, this is kind of the thing I'm thinking of. And then I said, but you're the designers and you know what works, and this is my ideas, but like, just whatever you come back with, I'm happy to have a look at. And the first thing they came back with was pretty much the cover as it is. I think I changed one thing, like the swordsman on in the silhouette had like this weird hat that was like, made it look more like Civil War era, and I was like, let's get rid of that. And then the buildings that sort of feature in the background weren't quite right, and we tried a few different things, and like went backwards and forwards slightly on the positioning of the text and stuff like that. But really, it was pretty much as it is now. They did an absolutely smashing job on it.
Seriously.
And as soon as I got that first proof through, before we made any changes, I immediately then went and commissioned them to do the other two covers.
I don't blame you.
I was just like, I loved it. It was absolutely brilliant. And a lot of my friends, or friends now, are using them as well. I think sometimes, because they're Ukrainian, there can be a bit of a language barrier. So you just got to be very careful how you word stuff, be precise in what you're saying. Because I think there's been a few miscommunications and things, but that's probably us being British and kind of not very straightforward. So, you know, we're not very direct as a people. So kind of umming and ahhing about things and not actually kind of just saying, this is what I want. You know?
Yeah,
So,
I think English is a pretty hard language. Yeah, like
yeah,
I feel like when I learned South Korean, it was a lot easier than learning English. I was like, these rules made sense. So yeah,
yeah.
like
English is like what, like 3 or 4 different languages, all like standing on each other's shoulders in a trench
yeah,
coat. You know, it's kind of,
my friend always asks me, he's like, "What is
yeah.
this word?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got you. Don't worry." Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to. I've been meaning to check them out for a while, so I'm really
Yeah.
glad to know that your books. I mean, those are some of the best I've seen from there. So
Oh, thank you.
definitely checking
Yeah.
that out. That's really
No,
awesome.
I love them. I recommend them all over the place. Yeah.
Well, that's
Definitely check
amazing.
them out.
So if you had this is awesome question for you. I feel like if you had to fight
Yeah.
one of your characters, which one
Yeah.
would you be most afraid of and why?
Yeah, this was a challenging one. I have to admit, this is a challenging one because the easy answer would be Belasco, the main character, because he's like the best swordsman in the world. But he's also, you know, he has been known to show mercy, and like, you know, he's not always doesn't always go for the kill if he doesn't think,
Mm.
you know, the other person should be killed. So he
Yeah,
might actually let me off because he'd be like, "There's no way you should be in the ring with me." Um, so the person I'd probably be most afraid to face would be a character, the Water King, who's the sort of crime boss. Because
oh, that's
he's a
cool.
nice guy, you know, he just happens to be the crime boss, but he's also totally ruthless.
Mm.
And you know, if he thinks you should be dead, you're going to be dead without having time to question it. Like there's this joke he kind of makes. I don't want to spoil it, but there's some, you know, there's this villain who's kind of at one point captures one of the characters is monologuing and kind of grandstanding, and that kind of gives them a chance to kind of break through their restraints and kind of, you know, and this is relayed to him and he just goes, bloody amateurs. Like, you know,
Awesome.
slit throats first, ask questions later, you know. Like, so yeah, I think he would be, yeah, he if he wants you dead, you're dead before you know it. So I would not want to mess with him.
Yeah, I'm excited to read that character for sure. So for our last one, do you have any news, updates, promos, or
Yeah.
current projects you could share with us?
Well, I've just started. I've taken a bit of a break because I've you know, had in fact our second son is 6 months old today, so we've had
Oh, congrats! That's
had a
awesome.
little one. Yeah, I'm like, where has that time gone? It's
Probably
a
that lack of
haze of,
sleep,
yeah,
right?
exactly, a haze of sleepless nights, and
We
I've
call it
been
being
trying to
dad
get
tired. It's a different type of tired.
yeah,
You lose all
exactly.
sorts of sense of time.
uh, uh, but yeah, so I've taken a bit of time off for that, and I've been trying to get my freelance copywriting business up and running. So if anyone
Oh,
wants any copy or content writing, jeffwritescopy.com, that's me.
oh yeah.
Uh,
Make sure you send that to me. We'll put it in the description.
oh,
Yeah,
awesome, thank
we'll
you.
we'll post it all over for you.
But I have just started working on my next fiction project. So I started plotting something, and it's a historical fiction. Sorry, historical Arthurian novel
Oh,
uh,
that's awesome. That's
called the last.
exciting.
It's called The Last Days of Lioness,
Oh,
which I had the idea from. So I live on the Isles of Scilly, which most people don't know about, even in the UK. It's like 5 inhabited islands and lots of uninhabited islands, about 28 miles off the coast of Cornwall.
okay.
So if you go right down to the southwest of England and just
Hmm.
keep going, we're off the end there. It's
Oh,
very
okay.
remote. Our island is like 2 miles long. We have 130 people living here. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
really tiny and quiet. And I did this event for the local arts festival over on St Mary's, which is the biggest island, as most people live there. And people kind of asking me, "Oh, have you ever thought about setting something locally?" And I was like, "Well, no, not really. I write kind of secondary world fantasy, and if you live here, it's difficult to write a book set here in the present day because everyone's going to assume you're writing, you're basing characters on them and stuff, and like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
tricky to do." And then a couple of days later, my son had gone into nursery, and I couldn't go to my friend's flat that I normally go to work while he was at nursery. And so I just sort of took myself off for a walk, and I was walking around St Mary's and thinking, oh, you know, what can I write about that would bring together kind of something local with my own interests? And I walked past this kind of this area where there's remains of an old castle, which date back to the early medieval period,
Oh, that's cool.
which has never been dug. It's never been archaeologically dug because it's basically in someone's back garden. It's kind of this
That's
this
cool.
hill fort in the back of somebody's back garden. And I was thinking, well, you know, I guess that's probably on the site of an older fortification, and well, that'll take you back to, yeah, well, I guess, you know, post-Roman, Dark Ages, early medieval, yes, it's about the days of King Arthur. And oh, hang on a minute, I've got an idea. And then I had the idea for this book. So I've just started plotting that. And as I said, I'm going to try and plot that one, then plot the next Belasco book, and then come back and forth. So that is something to look out for. Probably be well. I'm going to aim for trad publication for the Arthurian book.
That's cool.
Just because I think hybrid is quite nice to be hybrid, and
Yeah, I agree.
some stuff trad published, some stuff self published, and have the two kind of support each other.
Yeah.
So that. But yeah, I'm really excited to be getting back and doing a little bit of fiction. It's fitting in around everything else is tricky at the minute, but it's one of those things I can't keep away from it for too long.
Yeah.
I haven't run a promo in a while, so I would advise everyone just to watch this space, because I've probably overdue for me to do a discount on book one. So I will be doing one soon. And as I said earlier, like, if people want to read my novella, a prequel novella, you can get that for free by signing up to my newsletter. So that's
I'm gonna do that as soon as we get done. I'm gonna go do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, if you sign up, it's gmwhite.co.uk is my website. People can sign up there, and I'll ping them the novella and then a couple of other short stories that I've written as well. So yeah, that's thing. Yeah, having published the last book in June last year, it's been a bit of a hiatus, or kind of adjusted to life as a family of four, and I tried to get business up and running. But yeah, I'm back into doing my fiction now, and I will be doing a discount at some point soon.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to sign up for your newsletter. And just so to remind our audience, you can find all of Jeff's description, all of his social links in the description. I think I have your website, your Amazon, and a few things already set aside. So if there's anything else you want me to, push to the audience, feel free to give it to me. That all sounds really awesome, but I'm really excited about signing for the newsletter, starting the novella. I have a couple of reads in between. I think I have like 3 I got to finish for some reviews. So I'll be doing those shortly. But thank you so much for coming on, Jeff. I've been trying to get you on for a while, and I actually had you penciled in as someone to, get a hold of. So I was so glad that, we could, set you up for season 3. I loved your covers. I loved the blurb. And I was like, this is definitely going to be my type of series. So I'm really excited to, get started here in a little bit. It'd be awesome. Once I get once I get the novella read, and then book 1, I'm going to be doing the reviews starting for the channel this July. So
cool.
by the time this comes out, they'll already be out. So I'll send that to you before you're going. But if there's anything else I can do in the meantime, before this gets published, after Labor Day weekend and on the calendar, just let me know. I'd love to help you out with whatever. We got our podcast group on Facebook, so join that. You can share anything anytime. Like I said, we got some stuff that we're doing for you, authors and creators on our new website. So by the time this is out, you guys will be able to see our new website and the link and description. So we're really excited to help people out like Jeff and get their work out there. But Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to sign up for newsletter, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon in between on social media or email. And hope you guys have a great rest of the night there, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. I love, I listen to the podcast, and I love your enthusiasm for genre, just like shines through, man. And I'm really, really, really happy to have come on and to be able to talk to you.
Oh, awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Well, be on lookout for my emails, not just for this podcast, but some of those seminars and things, and we'll get you back on and situated, and we'll get your work out there as much as we can. So, but other than that, you guys have a great rest of the night, Jeff, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. See you later.
Take care.